and hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, if not now, when? In today's show, we are so excited to invite the serious entrepreneur Igor from Australia to join us. His story began by his parents moved to Australia from the former USSR in 1991. Igor started his entrepreneur journey when he was 16 building websites, and later moving to IT sector and spent decades building technology solutions. Until one day, he got hooked in golf and became accidental entrepreneurs with a virtual golf company. And after many incredible journeys, today he's a founder and CEO of 24/7 Golf and GolfTrak. With that, everybody, I am so excited to welcome Igor for the show today. Thank you so much. Let's get the show begin. So excited to have you on the show with us today. So let's dive into your journey. How does all the magic begin with you?
Well, it goes a long way back to 1980. So I was born on the day that the Olympic torch was being carried through my hometown called Chisinau in Moldova. So it used to be part of the USSR. It's its own country now. It's bankrupt. It's right next to Ukraine, wedged in between Ukraine and Romania. So my mom's family's from Ukraine. So I spent a lot of time in Ukraine when I was a kid. And it started there. I think I was kind of born an entrepreneur in a communist country. I was very different to the other kids. And probably the best example I remember back, I think in 1986, I was 6 years old. There was Monopoly first came to USSR, which was a big deal because it's the capitalist game, right? The epitome of capitalism is Monopoly. And it finally arrived, and so obviously I was one of the first to get it because I loved that stuff, and I played computer games very early days. But I'll just never forget that I got this Monopoly, but of course USSR released their own version of Monopoly, which was called cooperative. So it's the socialist version of capitalism. And then I got that game too. And I think there was another game maybe as well that I got. I can't remember. But the one thing I do remember is I played all these games and I was really frustrated. So I was like 7 or 8 years old, right? And I was frustrated because I couldn't make enough money. So I created my own board game where I chipped in all the money, the little paper money from all the other games into my game. And the good thing about my game was it had no end. So you just continue to make more and more money. So I was like 7 or 8 in a communist country. It's like I was definitely born a little bit different.
So you create a new game,
yeah.
So you get to win all the monies. You
Pretty
play
much.
with yourself.
Yeah, so you could just make more and more and more and more. I could play with my friends, but no one could beat me in Monopoly, obviously, because I was just so good at it and it was in my own game.
Why do you think you're always different?
Look, I think a lot of things, there's the question of nurture versus nature, right? So I think I was born with a bit of a spark, right? So I think that either happens or it doesn't. But the other thing is, really my parents. And my parents always encouraged me, and they always said that you can have anything you want in life as long as you're willing to work really hard for it. And I think I really took that to heart, and I saw that things were possible maybe where other people thought they're not possible. And so I always had this attitude, and got me into a lot of trouble as well, which I'm sure we'll get to later in the entrepreneurial journey, where I just believe things are possible. I see things. And that's what I try to instill in my kids as well, is that, everything is out there. You just got to be, willing to put in the work and keep trying.
Incredible. So tell us about journey when you're 10 years old.
Yeah. So we, the Soviet Union was falling apart, and we had a very long distance relative that, left in the late 20s or something to Australia. And so we ended up getting visas to come to immigrate to Australia after a very, 2 or 3 year sort of, hard work. And we flew from Moscow, I think via Delhi, or I can't remember where. But anyway, I remember through Singapore, we flew Aeroflot, and then Singapore, we flew, QF1, this Qantas flight. I think it's QF1, Singapore to Melbourne. And I remember, it was 10th of May, 1991. We landed in Melbourne. The most memorable thing about that flight is I didn't speak any English. But I knew that, and there was no Coca-Cola in Soviet Union, only Pepsi. So they obviously got the deal. And so I was offered a Coca-Cola on the flight, one of those little cans. By the end of that I think 8-hour flight, I had 33 cans of Coke.
What?
For a little 10-year-old kid. So I was bouncing off walls. It was pretty funny. Probably not funny for my parents, but that was a memorable trip. And we landed in Australia, and we had $200, which was all the money that my parents saved up over the time and from USSR. And my dad took so because the ruble collapsed, I remember my dad leaving the house with like 2 supermarket bags full of cash, rubles, to go to the bank to convert it, and he came back with 2 notes, $200 notes. So all we had was $200, I think 4 suitcases maybe. And we started our life in Australia and, went to school.
How was that like? Were you scary?
Look, I don't remember. I don't know if you have things like this when I don't remember much of my first 10 years of my life. It's kind of so much has happened since that I feel like those memories were just suppressed somewhere. It's like snippets. And that first year in Australia, I barely remember as well. I remember going to school and not being able to speak to anyone because they couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand them. And it probably was quite hard, but I don't remember because so much was going on. And, we used to go to like a supermarket and, I've never seen a supermarket. We've never seen like shelves with like stacked with food, So it was, we used to just, buy all these new things. So everything was so new. I remember it was pretty exciting, especially the food part. And off we went.
Relate.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's and kind of life just started going, and it was hard because back in '91 when we got to Australia, it was a heavy recession. So there's very little work. So my dad, was in IT, and like a software engineer, but he was just trying to get any job in tech, and I think he ended up his first job was like assembling like PCs for this little computer shop, like in a strip mall, for $5 an hour, and that was his first job. And for the first 2 years, he couldn't get work, anything besides that, and it was really tough.
How's that experience impacting you, Igor?
That's a good
Seeing
question.
your parents, moving to a new country, your dad was just find any job possible to support a family. How was that experience shaping you?
Well, I think, it allowed me to understand that, for your family, you do whatever it takes. Because when I was, fast forward a little bit, we'll come back to it, but, when I was in a really tough situation financially, it doesn't matter what I had to do. Like I had to make money for the family, to feed my child, to look after, as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of showed it to me, just whatever it takes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So fast forward, what happened? Now you settle in Australia, you find your groundings. What's next?
I guess I kind of always had the inkling that I wanted to build something. I used to play this game, Sid Meier's Civilizations, which is funny because the other famous person I know played it obsessively at that age was Elon Musk. I found out when I read his biography. It was really cool. And I used to be obsessed with it. I actually started playing it, the first version, back in Soviet Union. I learned a little bit of English from the game. And I always wanted to build. I loved tech. I was a super geek growing up. And I wanted to be in tech, and I pursued that. And so technically I started my first business. So I started working in tech for a company that my dad used to work for. It was a healthcare company. I used to run like network cables and, and peripherals and printers and stuff when I was like 14.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was working and I was really happy with that job. And then I worked at McDonald's for 3 months. I couldn't last more than 3 months. Wasn't my cup of tea. Although I learned a really good thing there. I learned a very valuable lesson, which I still remember today, which is to always say please and thank you when you ask for something and when you get something.
I love that.
They taught that very well in training, so that's interesting. And then I started my first business as such when I was about 17.
Tell us about that.
16 or 17. Well, I was messing around with websites, when no one ever knew what a website was. And I thought, well, companies will probably want it. So again, I went back to like when my dad used to work. I asked them if they wanted one, and they said yes. And so I created the first, website for them, and a logo that used to like spin. with an animated GIF. This is 97, right? This was like the most advanced piece of tech.
Love it.
Now, that company now is the biggest healthcare company in Australia, publicly listed, right? Multi-billion-dollar company. I did their first website.
Wow.
I think they paid me $100. I can't remember. But it was great.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I started that, and I just started talking to different businesses, people I knew about, do they want a website? And started building websites. And I worked through college. So I finished school at 17, went to college, did an IT degree. I kind of started, I was doing websites, and then I got a job. So I got a full-time job in one of the first e-commerce startups that had VC backing in Melbourne called Wishlist. And I was working full-time. It was about a 2-minute drive from my college campus. So I used to basically skip college and just turn up for the exams and work full-time in e-commerce.
While you at school?
Yeah.
That's insane.
School wasn't that hard. I didn't find it that hard. I didn't get the best marks, but I didn't care. And I worked through that. And then when I sort of finished, I worked there for maybe a year, and then I didn't like it anymore. It grew a lot, changed. So I started more consulting. I was like 18, 19, so I was doing software development as a consultant, earning silly money for, I was like $45 an hour for an 18, but back in 98.
Yeah.
Huge money.
Yeah. Well, you worked for yourself at the time?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I finished my college degree, and straight out I got a job in consulting. So I kind of went away from business, and because back then it was just at just after actually the 2000 crash, when tech went a bit down, and everyone was talking about how important it was to get into consulting, Oracle or SAP or this. So I ended up first in e-commerce consulting for a big second-tier multinational. And then I actually got somehow hired to SAP, SAP, so the Asia Pacific division. And I spent a few years working there. And actually, just before I started there, one of our good family friends gave me a book, which I'm sure you've heard about, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yes.
So I read that. I'm like, oh yeah, this is good, And while I was working, I started buying property. I was first with the help of my parents. Again, they've been very prominent in my life. And while I was working, I built up a bit of a really good portfolio. And then, I still wanted to go into business. And then that was my first real I was late 22, maybe 23. I had a really successful multi-million-dollar property portfolio. But I was kind of really miserable in my job. I was personally very unhappy. And I read all these books about how you have to quit your job, and find your passion and do all that. So I quit my job. And as I quit my job, I invested sort of the money from my properties into this business with, the Four Stooges. I was was three Stooges, and I was the fourth. And so I funded it, and it failed miserably, and I lost everything.
Everything?
I lost everything except one house.
What happened?
It was just, I committed the equity, and then it was like a house of cards. So the business was a complete sham, and so hundreds of thousands of dollars I invested into it was just blown in months, in like 3 months. But then because I quit my job, the bank I was in breach of my loan, my mortgage. And so they basically said you have to either refinance or sell your properties. And I was 23. I didn't know what I was doing. So I had a fire sale of all these properties and just to pay off all this debt. And it was just a disaster. So
how was that experience where
it
was your first test in the investing world or equity world, and you doubled down everything you have, and then overnight it seemed like you lost everything?
Well, it felt like overnight. And I remember to this day, so I was living in Sydney, and I had like just nothing left, and I was too embarrassed to ask my parents for help because I had all this success and I just blew it in such a monumental way. And I remember I called one of my former clients. I thought, well, what do I know? Like, what can I do, right? I can go back to consulting. So I called one of my former clients, which was in Brisbane, it was up north in Australia. And I said, do you need some services? And they said, yeah, come to Brisbane. we'd love your help to work on some stuff. And so I kind of set up a business, consulting business, and I got in my car. I had this red Honda sports car, I remember, and I drove it with all my belongings in the car. And I had so little money that I ran out of petrol. I was running out of petrol. When I got to Brisbane, I managed to get a place to stay with a friend. And I had just have enough fuel to get there, and I got to this petrol station, gas station they call it here. And all I had was like $2 in my pocket. I had literally no other cash except $2. And I hadn't eaten for like 8 hours for the entire drive. I was starving, and I remember I was like, what can I get? And I got a can of Coke for $1.80. I'll never forget this, right? Because I thought, okay, I'm thirsty and I'm hungry. This has sugar, and I can kind of quench my thirst. So I got a can of Coke for $1.80, and I had 20 cents left. And I'll just never forget that moment.
That's all you have left?
I had a car, and I had, but in terms of cash, like to go buy food, or like to dry clean my suit so I can go to on the next day to this client to try to win some work. That's all I had.
How do you mentally already, where you were a multimillionaire like months ago to today, you have $2 and you name when you're about to buy something to eat. How do you make peace with that and move forward?
I did not make peace with it.
Was it very hard?
It was very hard. But something happens. I think this is where your fight or flight instinct kicks in, and something really strange happened literally that day, because it was a Sunday, and on Monday I was going to go to the office of this client. It was a big power company, and hopefully win some work and invoice them and get some money in the door. And I was literally, it was this weird feeling. Like I went and started rummaging through all of my belongings. I'm like, maybe I left like $50 or $100 or $20 in one of my pockets or something. So I was like just searching, and I opened my wallet and I had all these receipts. I used to carry a really thick wallet, and it used to be like a hoarder of receipts. It was a really silly thing. And I start pulling out, and as I pull out a check for $700. I had in my wallet. But it was a Sunday, and you can't bank a check on a Sunday. And so I asked my friend who I was staying with, it was like near downtown, and I said, like, where can I check? And she said, well, you can go to this company called Cash Converters. It's like a pawn shop. It's the big chain in Australia. And so I went, and they cashed it for me, but they take a 30% cut to give you the cash. So that $700 gave me $400 something.
Oh my goodness.
And that started, that basically started my business.
Oh my God.
And so I went that Monday to this client. The next day, put on a brave face, put on my suit, and I was good at what I did, and they liked my approach. And one of the things they liked, and I think this answers your question, like what makes me different or continue, I would always approach a problem that they would raise with, okay, how can we solve that? Like I would never go and go, that can be done. My answer was always, okay, let's figure out how to do it. And for me, that made sense. And at the time, I didn't realize that that's what was different to a lot of other consultants. And so I went and I won work, and I started working there. And then they needed another person. So I went and put an ad up, and I interviewed people, and I hired another person. And 3 years later, I had 21 people.
Wow.
And doing 4.5 million turnover.
Wow.
But wait, I lost all of that too. But I'll get to that.
What happened?
So
okay, you were so successful in 3 years later, like multi-million-dollar business. You were on top of the game at that moment. Then what happened?
So about halfway through the growth. So first year, I think I did like $86,000 revenue. Second year, did I think, and I know these numbers really well. So the lesson to be learned here, right? Know your numbers. I did $287,000 revenue. So it's like, all right, I already had one person working for me. I think it was one. And then second year is when it really took off, and I did 1.6 million. And along that growth, I had this couple who used to work for me, contracting, and they're husband and wife. I said to them, hey, look, I'm really good at sales, which by the way, I learned completely by accident. I don't know how I got good at sales, but I fell in love with sales. And I think every entrepreneur, to be successful, has to love sales. Like
Why is that?
It's the number one skill.
Mm.
And when I say sales, it's influencing people, motivating your people, motivating your staff, motivating your supplier, talking to your suppliers and telling them, look, I'll pay you next month, I promise. But being able to exude that sort of sales instinct to convince people, I think that overall I call sales.
I love that.
And I think it's the number one skill. It's when I had kids, I said the first thing I'm going to teach them is how to sell. It's like my 7.5-year-old can out-negotiate most people.
How do you teach them?
We'll get to that. I have to think about that one. I'm not even sure.
Great. So you're a fantastic salesperson, and when
by accident. I at least I thought I was. So I said to these guys, I said, you do the delivery, right? Because you're good at project managing and all of that. And because it was like an IT change management, sort of project transformation. And I will go and sell. And we did that, and the company grew to, like I said, 4.5 million in a year and a half after that. And they, in fact, I'll again, these little, there's these little moments in your life you will always remember. It's like these very turning points that you don't realize they're turning points as they're happening. I remember in July, I think it was 2006, 2007. I can't remember. I think it's 2007. Somewhere in there. I woke up in a panic one morning. I was working in Sydney for Village Roadshow. You know, Village, they're like a big Warner Brothers, they're like Australian equivalent. And I woke up in a hotel room and I'm like in this massive panic. I'm like, I got to get out of the business. I got to get them out of, like, something's wrong. I got to get them out.
Just because?
I could sense something was not right, and this was July, right? This is just after my birthday. I remember, first week of July.
Wow.
And I'm going, something's not right. And I had these mentors I used to pay, like, to help me with the business. And I spoke to them, and I don't know, somehow I convinced them, they convinced me everything will be fine. There's nothing wrong. The business is growing so well. Don't screw it up. But it was not fine. And they started having these conversations with me like, hey, we're doing all this hard work. And all you do is have coffee with people all day. I'm like, yeah, that's called sales. How for 20 years you were contracting and you never had any staff. And now we have 21 staff and doing over 4 mil. That's called sales. But they refused to believe that. And in the end, I said, look, okay, I'm going to be pragmatic about this. I'll sell the company to you, right? Because I was ready to move on. To be honest, I didn't love the company. I pretty much hated every day waking up and going to the office, but I made good money. But my passions lay elsewhere. And it was just a tool. So I said, buy me out. And they're like, no, they're not going to buy me out. Well, what do you mean? Like, so what are we going to do? Like, well, they just wanted, like, I gave them 40% of the company for free. I said, run it. So I had 60%. And they said, no, we want 60%, you have 40. Like, but hold on, I built this. I sold this. I sold all this work. And we were at this stalemate. And then I had really 2 big clients. One of them was massive. It was like 80% of my revenue, which was a big mistake to make in a consulting business. Which was one of the biggest mining companies in the world, based in Australia, called Rio Tinto. And these guys had like friends in procurement. And what they literally did at that company and another big mining company that was also a client, they got them to rewrite contracts from 1st of January, so after the new year, 1st of January, to their private company, another company they set up. And so 1st of January, I lost 80% of my revenue.
Wait, I don't understand. So they write a contract?
Yeah, like a purchase order, yeah. They rerouted the purchase order to another company, that they owned.
Oh.
And they just took the contractors that we had, because obviously, like, we would pay our contractors, call it $700 a day, and we charge them out $1,000 a day.
So they take those contractors to do...
Yeah, they took no expense, so no offices, no computer, no equipment, no technologies. They said, oh no, we'll just take them. And so I literally lost my entire business overnight.
Oh, wow.
And I went, like, I wanted to sue them and I wanted this. And at the time I met this amazing woman, Carolyn Deegan. She's one of my mentors. She's an amazing lawyer in Sydney. And I was telling her the story when I first met her at dinner. And And she said to me, she said, you can spend the next 3 years and probably $700,000 going to court, and you will lose because you'd have to sue Rio Tinto. It's a $50 billion company, like as if you're going to sue them, you know. I said, or you can take that money and that energy and rebuild.
Mm.
And I listened to her, and I went and I rebuilt, and I got. It was very, very hard. I was going through extreme depression and, you know, anxiety and all of that.
How do you move forward?
Which other way is there to go? Right? That's always the question.
Point.
Whenever people ask me, how do you keep going? I'm like, I don't know where else to go.
Yeah.
Like, what else do you do? Just, I don't know. Like, I don't, I mean, maybe other people find maybe that's how people get into substances or other things. I was like, I wasn't interested in those things. I'm very lucky that they never excited me. You know, I was an adrenaline junkie. I used to race cars, and all of that was what excited me. I'm like, well, I can't go race cars to get over this things. Like, the only thing I can do is just keep going and keep trying to, you know, build it and try again.
That's incredible. So you lost everything second time. So what's next? Do you build exact same businesses, or do you shift into a different world?
I started building the same business, and I managed to win something like $700,000 of contracts. Like, I remember Alcatel-Lucent, which is a massive telco multinational, another steel manufacturer, one of the biggest in Australia, and another one I can't remember now. And I got these contracts, and I started hiring staff to deliver. And then 2007, remember the little GFC we had, the global financial crisis, 2007?
Of course.
Yeah. So in that same week, it was March, I think, 2007 when it hit. In 1 week, I got a phone call from every one of those companies that said, we've canceled the project. And that's when I really lost everything. And like, just everything gone, you know, and all the people I hired to rebuild and everything gone. And so I had to like max out my house equity to do that, borrow from my parents again. And that was probably one of the toughest times. Again, I was like, well, what do you do? Like, I can't lose the house, you know, where my parents live, you know, and the family house. So I was like, okay, I gotta go try to find a job. So I went, got a job.
Wow, that must take a lot of courage. Shifting from entrepreneur and a business owner, now have to humble down to get a job so you can get over this period.
Yeah, the toughest part was, you know, like making up all this stuff in the interview on the resume about. I mean, I did a lot of really amazing things, but when you go to a job interview, you know, you don't really want to kind of tell about all the, you know, the entrepreneurial stuff. You want to be more, you know, stable and all that. So, you know, I used a little bit of creativity in the job interview. I'll use that word to get the job. But, you know, first job interview I got the job. It was a really good job, and I ended up over 3 years there, and it allowed me to pay down some debt. You know, I've never, I take this with pride, I've never defaulted on a single loan in my life. So just keep working, keep spinning those wheels.
Then what happened, Igor?
Then, so obviously I had, you know, once you have an entrepreneurial itch, there's nothing that can stop that. You know, there's no job can ever stop that. You know, you become unemployable, you know, really. It can be a temporary thing, but really you're unemployable. And I tried a few different businesses. I had like a car rental business, like exotic cars, and that, you know, that was a strange business. Well, we can skip that one. And then I was working at Australia Post. That's the job I got. And at the bottom of the tower where the office was, there was this massive empty retail space. It was about 6,000 square feet with quite a large frontage. And around the same time, one of my good friends that I've become good friends with, he was a good golfer. And he kind of got me into golf a little bit. So I was about 30 then, just before 30. And he said, there's this place where you can play indoor and get lessons. So why don't you come get some lessons so you can get a bit better? Because I really sucked at it when I first started, as everyone sucks at golf, or almost everyone. when they first start out. And then, so I went there and I'm like, oh, this is a really cool place. And, it had like virtual screens, so like virtual golf. So it had 6, I think, screens. You could get lessons, you could play courses. I'm like, this is really cool. It was tech and it was golf and it was exciting. And I said, and I've kind of paid off some of my debt and, I was about to take, I'm like, maybe I can, do a business. So I said to my friends, why don't we, take this and move it into downtown where this office building is. And it turns out it was going out of business, this business. And so with another partner who used to work there, we bought the business for very little and moved it into this space at the bottom of Australia Post and opened a 6,000 square foot, indoor golf center. And that's how I got into golf.
Wow. Igor, your story just, it's like a movie that playing in front of us. I'm just so impressed and wow.
Thank you.
Now what's next?
So next is, I ended up, I wasn't going to work in the business because I was going to work in tech and kind of fund it. But we kind of learned that, it wasn't that easy to have a fully, managed business. And so I had to kind of step in. And in the end, I ended up leaving my job and working in the business. And I, unfortunately, I didn't earn an income from that business for years. In fact, I never earned any income from that business. But at the time, I also met my wife. We got married, had our firstborn, our little boy. And, I wasn't making any money. And that kind of, that was that sort of loop to that story I was telling you before, that I had to do something. And I had to do something that allowed me to still work in this business because I was so desperate to make it work and make it a profitable business and trying to get some kind of income out of it. And I ended up acquiring this little like a I don't know what you call it here, but it was an Australia Post like contract where you deliver mail bags and to these points, and it was only like 2 or 3 hours of work every morning. And so I bought this little van, this Suzuki little van. And I used to drive in the mornings and deliver these mail bags. And I used to make maybe, $500 a week at best. Sometimes less, sometimes $350 a week. And do that in the morning. My wife was working part-time at the time in the education sector. And then, I would work from sort of 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. at this Australia Post thing. Driving this little van, delivering mail bags. And then I would go to the downtown and work in the shop till 10 at night.
Igor, you hustles and wow, like how do you never look back? Because at that moment, this moment, you do whatever it takes to just make sure, put food on the table for your family and, be there for everybody. But how do you handle all that where there's so much glory in the past and you just move forward? How do you able to keep going?
With great difficulty is the true answer. It's very hard. It's I think you got to make a really conscious choice. What do you really want in life?
What do you really want in life, Igor?
Freedom. Freedom to do the things that I really want to do and to give my family the freedom to do whatever they want to do. And I think that can only come from an entrepreneurial journey. I'm sure there are people who find that in other places, and that's fantastic and amazing for them. But for me, it's definitely the pursuit of the entrepreneurial journey.
Do you always know that?
I think I've always known that. And I don't think, I can't even imagine being different. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like trying to, like imagine being a horse. I just can't.
Yeah. Wow. You really hustles. You really just want to make it work. And I'm just so inspired by the fire in your heart. Igor, you said that you were born a little bit different, have that spark. And now as you advance in your life, you can see that spark growing bigger and bigger and brighter. And yes, there are setbacks, there are challenges, there are quote-unquote failure, even though I don't never think there's actually a failure. But all the events happen, I only see the spark get brighter, get greater.
Not always, but I'm sure you have that spark. I mean, I've heard your story, and I think you definitely have it. You know what I'm talking about. It's something inside that you can't explain.
I completely understand.
And I feel sorry for my parents sometimes because they have to watch this roller coaster. I feel sorry for my family, my wife and kids. Sometimes they have to, put up with this crazy at times vision. But we're a family, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't have their support. And so
I love that. It's like you cannot not do.
Yeah.
You cannot not be. You cannot not follow that heart, that calling in your chest, and just telling you there's so much more. Pulling you forward.
Exactly.
That is so inspiring. So what's next? At this moment, you are hustling. You build a family, and you're trying to make the golf business work in the downtown. And then what's next?
And then I started opening. I had this idea called 24/7 Golf, and the idea was to open these indoor golf centers where you can practice like those 24-hour gyms, where there's no staff. And so I opened the first one near my house, and it did okay. And then I opened another one in downtown. And at the time, also when I opened my first one, I really wanted to get out of this current business I was in with the two partners.
Why?
I just didn't see a future in it. We tried for over 5 years to really make it happen. And I just felt like it just was never going to scale.
Is it because of business model, cash flow, location?
So the rent, like the rent where we paid the lease, was was $360,000 a year. All right.
That's insane.
And when we at the end of the 5-year mark, our landlord wanted to increase to $600,000. It wasn't viable. And it was always going to, and it is now, it's a successful small business, and those guys have done a great job with it. And I'm proud of what they've done. It just wasn't the scale that I was seeking. I wanted to build something world-changing.
You want to build the world first monopoly where it just keep coming.
That's it. Exactly. And so I thought these 24-hour centers, I could open hundreds and hundreds, thousands of them. You expand to America, etc. So I opened my first one and did okay. Hence the name 24/7 Golf. Kind of stuck. I created the brand myself, designed it myself. Obviously with a graphical designer, but the concept was
very nice.
Was mine. And then opened the second one. And so when I had left my business partners, and it failed miserably. And the second one, and I invested. I borrowed money again from my parents, and kind of all my savings and credit cards and all that. Maxed everything out. Opened this venue, and it just failed.
How do you have no fear, Igor? Like you just grab everything you have and jump into the next thing.
So I think it's a really good question, and it's a lesson I hope to teach my kids. It's not I didn't have fear. It was I had too much delusion. and I mean that and I mean that in both a positive way and a negative way. So in a positive way, it's like I had this vision, and I was so convinced that it's going to work, that there was no fear, because like, how could there be fear? It's like, imagine you have a winning lottery. Like, someone from the future gave you the numbers, right? And you go like these are the numbers. Like, why would I have fear going into a 7-Eleven and buying these lottery numbers when I know they're the winning numbers? You just know. And so I knew. However, the entrepreneurial, confidence of just knowing doesn't always work out, does it? And so I had no fear because I was convinced that it was going to work. And then it didn't. And
how was that? How did you and your family take that news?
So the good thing, by then I was getting a little bit smarter. I was still pretty silly in some ways, but I knew I had to pull the plug pretty quick, to really make sure I don't spiral into a massive debt. So I pulled the plug, and I said, okay, I need to sell this equipment that I've got in the shop, which was the golf simulators, And so I posted them on Facebook Marketplace, and I sold them in like a week. I'm like, this was easy. It's a lot easier than running this business, with this venue and retail space and staff and all of that. And so I bought a few more, from the US. It was actually an American company called SkyTrak. And so I bought a few more and I sold those. And I thought to myself, why didn't I do this earlier? I was selling. So when we had this big venue, it was called GolfTrak Australia. We used to sell simulators to other people that would come to us, but it was quite expensive because back then there was nothing available. It was the SkyTrak unit, it was like $2,000, this box. And so it really opened the market up to a lot more people. And so I just started selling it. And by accident, I ended up with an e-commerce business. But before that, when the business failed, I was in a really bad spot. And one thing you learn when you have debt and you go into bad positions is you learn that most debt, you have either 90 days or 120 days before you go past what's called a point of no return. So for example, with a bank, if you're 120 days late on your mortgage, they sell the house for you, right? That's it. You got no control from that point. And, this is our family house, my parents live in it. And it was day 106. It was actually a little bit. It was about day 100 when this whole idea that I'm about to literally lose everything I've managed to hold on to, destroy my family, destroy everything my parents built. Coming as immigrants. It was a pretty horrendous moment. And and it was end of November, and so because Australia that summer. And Christmas, like everyone just leaves. No one works around from like 17th of December till after Australia Day, which is 26th of January. The kind of commercial world is on a holiday, vacation. And I was like, I need a job. How am I going to find a job? And I started applying for every job that was even remotely in IT. And I managed to get a contract within like the first week it was 2 weeks, because I remember at the end of the first week, I didn't get a single reply. And I was devastated. I thought, this is it. This is the end. And then I got an interview and I managed to get the job. And I remember, again, a very valuable lesson, right? So I called every person or every company I owed money to. And I said, look, I've got this. I sent them a copy of the contract. I've got this job. I'm getting paid. But they wouldn't pay me the first payment until like 14th of January. And I said, I just need an extra 6 weeks. I said, here's the contract. All the money will go to that. Just please don't bankrupt me. And one thing I learned, every company you owe money to would rather you pay it back late than never. So every one of them agreed. I said, no problem. Okay, fine. So they held off. And so I started this job for, back when I was at Australia Post, this job was like a third of the salary, but it was something. And I started working my way up, and, like 6 months later, I was double the salary, and then went and got another job and increased the salary again. And, I laugh about this with my wife because I got quite a low level sort of process analyst job. I hope the guys that actually gave me that job don't listen to this, because there was a bit of creativity in that job interview as well. But I ended up climbing the ladder so quickly that I was basically a CTO within 2.5 years. And the interesting thing is, and this will bring me back to a point about why am I in America. When I got this CTO job, I was applying for like project management and contracts, and because what I realized by that point is, as my e-commerce was slowly growing, cash flow is king. So I made a promise to my family, until my business is on its own 2 feet, I am going to have a job, and I will work on the business at night, in the morning, whenever. And so I kept that job, and I was applying for these different jobs, and the guy that hired me was an American, and he kind of looked at my resume, and it was, I remember, because when I got hired, I got access to all the folders, and one of the folders was my resume with like notes in it, and I read his notes, and he highlighted all the things I had hoped people would value, my experience, very different experience, my entrepreneurial experience, he said, "That's the guy. That's who we want to run this." Because it was a bit of a startup, and I had an amazing experience there, and it was my favorite job of my career. And I left it only when I moved to America.
Why?
Why did I leave, or why did I move to America?
Why do you leave? Because as you said, it's the best job ever. You were in a great footing. Your business growing. Everything seems great.
So during COVID, during pandemic, obviously Australia was in heavy lockdown. So my e-commerce business went through the roof, and it grew very quickly. And the job was amazing. So I had this amazing job. We bought a house for ourselves just before the lockdown. So life was great. But I have the itch. And the itch is, it's not enough. And I've been wanting to move to America for 20 plus years.
Why?
Because America gives you a playground. I call it a playground, but it gives you a pond to play in that is bigger than any other pond in the world.
You get a bigger game of Monopoly that you get to play.
You got it.
Amazing.
I actually never tied that story to this, but that was very artful. That's exactly what it is. It wasn't enough. It wasn't a true test of who you are as an entrepreneur.
Who do you think you are as an entrepreneur, Igor?
That's a good question.
That's why I ask.
I think I'm just someone who I want to change the world in my own way using tech. And I ended up in golf, and I'm mad over golf. I love golf. It's my happy place. And I think that there is and the great thing is people who love golf, like people who are golfers, that like it's not, I don't think it's like other sports. People get really obsessed with golf. And so being in that industry, I find really rewarding because you do something that makes people so happy. And so that's who I am as an entrepreneur. I want to change the world of sport and golf with tech. And that's how, I ended up with this golf simulator business. And then out of that, I ended up building an app.
GolfTrak.
GolfTrak. And again, kind of by accident, I had this 24/7 golf business, right? We had these two cameras I hired some engineer to write some software to synchronize with a person hitting a shot. And I was looking at the video. I'm like, I wonder if actually we got the cameras. Then I got these phones instead of the cameras because there were better cameras in the phone than the cameras. I thought, I wonder if we could track the ball just using a phone. Well, 6 years later, yes, we can.
I think you're just so magical, Igor. I think you are just follow that curiosity in your heart, thinking what is next? How do we solve this problem? How do we make this better? How do we provide a greater happiness to your customer who love golf as much as you are? And one step at a time, today 24/7 Golf or GolfTrak has been a complete solution to supporting him or her on their journey of being a better golfer.
That's right. And it's what GolfTrak has shown is you can make it available to everyone because everyone's got a phone in their pocket. And I think that's what I craved in moving here, in exploring a bigger market, is being able to deliver what I think is a really valuable thing, like a product, to so many more people in a way that really makes it not just affordable because it's a phone, but it's just convenience. Like you already have the phone, and cameras are so amazing these days on phones. That's how I ended up with GolfTrak. So again, kind of by accident.
That's amazing. And so for listeners who are just now, as I so intrigued, where can he or she get one themselves?
So of course, thank you. So my website is www.247.golf. So that's where you can buy the simulators, and my app is GolfTrak, GolfTrak.app. There's some information on there as well, and we'll make sure link in the bio and all, so everybody can go there to grab one yourself. Thank you.
I'm curious, Igor. Now it's long journey to home regarding now, I feel like you truly find what you really passionate and you love to do, and now you get to share this with a bigger world. I'm curious, what's your thought about being I feel like you were driven by success long ago. What's your definition for success? And do you think at this moment you've been there already?
Another really good question. It's a cliche. People say success is not the destination, it's the journey. And for many years, I really thought, what a silly cliche. I don't want the journey. I just want, I want the mansion and the nice car and the holidays.
Bring me to the end point.
That's right. Yeah, hit the little fast forward button. But it's, as I went through it, what I realized, and having a family, and having these most amazing kids and amazing wife and amazing parents has taught me that success is having that freedom to be with the people you want to be with, so like your family, and give them and yourself the experiences that make life worth living. So my wife and I, one thing we share very strongly is we love travel. We've been to 28 countries each. We and with our kids, and what we want for them is to see the world, to experience the world.
I love that.
Because, I've been successful in the terms of success, fancy cars and, this and that. And I've also been completely broke. And definitely I choose having money over not having money, right? But when I was also really successful, I was also really miserable at times, in terms of my emotional state. So it is the journey as such, but you also need context. You need to make it. The journey needs to be worthwhile for you and your family. It needs to mean something. And for us, it's really the experience of what the world has to offer. Do I consider myself successful? If I'm honest, kind of half-half. I feel like sometimes I forget, where we are. Like we moved to America less than a year ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I love it here. I love being in Texas. But do I feel like I've made it? No. But I also, having spoken to other entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that I perceive to be successful, I think that's the thing about entrepreneurs. They're really sort of the ones that are out there changing the world. I think they never feel successful. I think that for them, it's never enough. It's not about arriving somewhere. It's the ability. It's having the ability to keep going down this journey.
I love
to
that.
Making that decision every morning when you wake up. I'm going to go on this journey.
Stay hungry, stay humble.
That's right.
Love that. Igor, I think you are so interesting because the journey you took, like you said, you live in extraordinary time where at the moment you had everything, and also you live through moments where you lost everything. With that, so much up and down in life, and also you physically journey far, right, from Australia now to the United States and traveled around the world. I wonder, what is one truth you think that has truly remained constant despite the good time and downtime and all the things between? If you pass to your children, if you tell him, what is one great truth that you hold to your heart after seeing all there is in business, in life, personally, mentally, all and above? What is one great truth you wish he to understood from your experience?
That's a good question. What is the one truth? I think it comes down to whatever that truth may be, whatever that happiness that you seek or enlightenment or success, financial, emotional, anything. I think the one thing that really comes down to is everything is within yourself. It is never out there somewhere. Someone once told me that the thing with running away, when people run away from somewhere, the problem with running away is that you're always there. Right? And and that actually makes sense because ultimately you can't run away from yourself. So whatever it is that you seek, it's always within yourself.
Oh, I love that so much because I oftentimes think entrepreneurship is truly a spiritual journey. It's just you and the world, and whatever you're looking for is already inside you. And what a beautiful statement.
Thank you.
My last question to you, Igor, is what do you define American dream? Today you journey far, you finally, find a home in Texas. How do you see about American dream, if you have one?
I think the American dream is that, they talk a lot about freedom. And I'm not sure if people truly understand what that means, because I think you only know what that is when you haven't had it, when it's been taken away from you. And freedom can be freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of pursuing your journey. And to me, the American dream and what America does so well, and I wish more people who live here, who grew up here, understand this, because like you and I have come from very different places to America, right?
Yep.
I'm not talking about Australia either. Is that freedom to be and pursue whatever you want and be whoever you want, and like really truly pursue what's inside yourself and explore that. I think that is the true American dream, and that's what America does so well. And I hope people don't take it for granted.
So beautiful. I have goosebumps hearing you saying that. And you are so, so right. And I think so true that I hear we get to be whoever we want to be. We get to experience whatever journey you want to pursue, because at the end of the day, the world, it is truly your oyster if you choose to see it that way.
And it's not like that in a lot of places around the world.
Here.
You don't have kids yet, do you?
I do not.
No. If you ever do, there's one phrase, and someone told me this only recently.
Yeah.
It's one of the most amazing, and it applies to people like us, immigrants.
Tell us.
So I was in a circle of entrepreneur dads, and one of the challenges that comes up is, we achieve success, but a lot of us come from nothing. And the question is, how do you raise your kids not to be spoiled brats? How do you teach them the values that we grew up with? And we got those values because we had nothing. And someone said, you cannot fake poverty. You can always go to Africa, you can go, or wherever, and see hungry kids, and you can help them and feed them. But you yourself, you're not one of those kids. You have everything. My kids are growing up in a 4,500 square foot house with a pool overlooking the golf course. Like, they are not growing up how I grew up, and you can't force that poverty that we had growing up onto them, because it doesn't work, because it's fake. So we have to find another way to teach them our values, our hunger.
Did you find a way?
I'm working on it. I don't think I'll know until they're grown up.
Please give me a call when you find out.
I will. Maybe you'll have my son on the podcast and my daughter one day.
Hey. Wow, what an amazing journey. Thank you so much, Igor.
Thank you.
For such a wonderful, amazing, heart-opening conversation. I feel so inspired and just enlightened by the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you everybody for listening today. I so hope you enjoyed as well as much as I do. And we cannot wait to see you all next week. Bye, guys.